Today we will be discussing 5 and 6 and not 7 today. Natalie and Laura.
Oh, darn. Okay.
So essentially the first one is money is power. The
Wait.
full
What
myth.
book are we reading?
Oh yes, this book is
Killing Sacred Cows.
yes, Killing Sacred Cows. Overcoming the Financial Myths That Are Destroying Our Prosperity by Garrett B. Gunderson. I've never said his name before, actually. So myth 5 and 6. So myth 5, money is power. So the full myth he kind of writes out is you have to have money to make money. And then money is evil, but it's power. And so I feel like by the time he finishes breaking down this myth, it's almost like, wow, like this myth is just a way for us to kind of use an excuse, right? So, like for instance, you have to have money to make money. Well, he kind of debunks this, but it's like I feel like a lot of people use that excuse to stop themselves from investing or doing their own business or really adding that value, like he kind of talks about in this chapter. And then money is evil. It's like, I feel like that was actually something that someone else said that was mistaken. It's not money that's evil, it's the love that's evil.
Yeah.
So what are you guys' first impressions of this chapter? Was it kind of, did you expect, so kind of knowing the myth, as you read the myth, did you kind of expect the chapter to kind of go the way it did?
Well, I kind of went back and forth through the chapter as far as, is this guy like anti-money, or it's just a different way of looking at, what is the point of money in that sense? And I think that's kind of the bigger thing. It's okay, not that money is not important, but again, money shouldn't be the end all be all. Again, money is not the root of all power. It's, power comes from money. Is that the better way of kind of flipping it back on side? You do what you want to do, kind of take care of what you need, and the money always comes, right? And it seems that that's kind of his that I got from it, is don't make making money part of it the goal, when you don't need money to do everything. Do what you want to do, and the money kind of flows by default. As you kind of create this value, money's going to come to you. So you don't need the money to create the value. Create the value, then the money automatically comes.
Exactly. It's like the typical, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Well, here, obviously, the value comes first, but I think everybody's like, no, the money comes first. It's like, no, that's the myth.
Well, he takes time to point out that money only has the value that we give it, right? So, it's like a $20 bill. He talks about if you're homeless, well, a $20 bill might feed you for 4 meals. Whereas if you're a billionaire, $20 is like,
that's a snack.
He needs that. Right. And so
Right.
I think he does a good job explaining how we should actually perceive money, because so many of us perceive it so incorrectly that I think a lot of times we're stifled, or we stop, or, people say they don't want to be evil, so they don't want to make money. They don't want money to control them and that kind of stuff. And I think in this chapter, in this myth, he almost gives us permission to not feel that way, and to realize that the only thing that's actually evil is you. Like it's not the money, because if it wasn't green dollars and we gave leaves value, then money would be literally growing on trees.
Which I feel like is a kind of a hard pill to swallow for some people, right? It's not the money, it's you. It's like, you mean.
Well, sure. Is this the chapter that he talks about, like, looking at yourself and pointing the finger back at the man in the mirror? Is the money, or is it the one right before money that I can't remember, but he kind of talks about that in one of these 2 chapters, was like, the problem is always you. It's never external. It's always internal. But so many of us want to say, oh, well, when he was talking about Enron, that was where he was talking about this. So many people were saying, oh, well, it was the company, it was the this, it was the that. And very few people took ownership in the fact that they uneducatedly, blindly just stuck their money there because someone said it was a good idea instead of getting educated. And then, he talks about the guy who takes the situation where he starts making the t-shirts or whatever. I worked for Enron and all I got was this stupid t-shirt and made a positive out of a negative. And none of that had to do with the money at all. It had to do with how were people processing the situation they were in that impacted their money.
Right. No, I think that's a fantastic point, because it's like that example I felt like was pretty powerful, because it's like with Enron, we used to study in school a lot when I did audit. And so it was just like, whole story is just everybody got fucked, but in here it's like, okay, well, yeah, sure. But then there was another guy that tried to spin a positive out of it and ended up making some money off of it, whereas I don't even know that he was trying to make money. I think he was really just it was just more of a value thing, right? But yes. So also in this chapter he kind of talks about, he says Paul never said that money is the root of all evil. He said that the love of money is the root of all evil. Whereas somewhere along the line, we've kind of changed that to money is the root of all evil. However, we also come to worship the damn thing, and it's nothing but a byproduct. Reading this chapter, what do you guys think are some of the reasons our society, one, worships money, and then also still believes it's evil?
I think a big thing is that only 2% of our population has enough money to be comfortable and significantly comfortable. Everyone else is still chasing that dream.
Right.
And I think there's everyone believes they'll never achieve that too. And so they look at those 2% as the bad people and that envious of them maybe, or wanting what they have.
Right. Yeah, well, I was going to say that, it's easier to blame not wanting to be evil and stay poor or broke than it is to actually work and put in the time to not become broke. And so at that point, it justifies why they're not doing it. I think this was the chapter that he also talked about the study. They did a study of 1,000 people or a whole bunch of people, and there was so many left, and 80 of them or I think it was 82 of them ended up finding financial freedom. And hard work and grit was kind of the things that there were 5 things that each person had in common. But I think if you take away whatever the fancy words were they used, it was hard work, grit, dedication, the willingness to put in the work and not see the obstacles. Right. And so for me, I think it's a lazy excuse. I think it gives people
in that example, his characteristics of those people that became successful were actually kind of surprising to me.
Yes, and so he kind of talks about the individuals. He calls them stewards. I feel like, the way he explains a steward, it's like, so Laura, to your point, I think it's easier to blame someone else than to actually do what it takes to be a steward. Because, these are the ones that are kind of adding the value, and he's preaching over and over. It's not the money, it's the value. It's just a byproduct of the value. So let's see. Also he says money is not a prime mover. And this is really kind of diving further into that stewardship. I feel like a lot of the times, and I've actually been kind of guilty of this, a lot of the times I'll say something like, man, if I just had some more money, I could do this. And it's like, you know what I'm actually saying is I'm not confident in my ability to do this, so I need something else to help do it. because it's not the money that's kind of moving and shaking. It's the people. You know, it's those producers, it's those stewards. What do you guys think?
Well, I think that's kind of, I mean, the transfer of value as well as what money represents in that
Right.
sense. I think they use the example of, I get the pig farmer and the wheat farmer, I think, right? The pig, if they both want the same thing, that's easy, right? You take the pig, I take the wheat, right? But if they don't have, if you have the pig and I don't want the pig, and I have the wheat, you don't want the wheat, but how do we do this? Well, by
Exactly.
assigning value to what I do want, and me using a monetary value for that allows you to transact the value part of it and putting an economic piece on it. Again, you're not selling, you're not buying use of money. You're figuring out how do we create a value proposition between us. You want this, I want this, that. But how do we figure out to do it? You do it by the utilization of money. Again, the money is not the thing that makes it happen. It's the value that makes it happen. Using the value as an expression, money as an expression of value.
Exactly.
That's kind of I think a theme kind of through that chapter of taking it out and just saying about using value and as opposed to just monetary value. What is the number, right? Going back on the earlier chapters, it doesn't matter what what's in the account. It's the value that you're getting from that account, right? It's not a value of let's save. Again, money makes power. No, what do you want? It's the value that makes the power that you want. What do you want to be doing with the accumulation, and people that are just accumulating, if you will,
right?
Numbers. Those are the consumers and the poisoners and the people. Now, that being said, he's always making the example of the banks and what do the banks want, right? I mean, it's almost like all these things, then these myths, if you will, are a manner of creating economic control over mass, right? I mean, can you think about it? He is not a big fan of banks, right? Can you imagine, if his philosophies it came to fruition? Why am I giving money to a bank?
Exactly.
Right? They can make the goal of me putting, it shouldn't be about saving which is the whole bank business, right? I want to earn, I want to value all this stuff. So why am I giving to the bank for them to all do it for them selfishly for them off of my back? I should be doing it for myself to keep my own back, if you will.
Right.
But it is definitely interesting concepts as this economic slavery, I guess. There's a fish song, "Slave to the Traffic Light," right?
Right.
It's he's creating this. I don't want to say that the majority of the U.S. population is mindless zombies, chasing this almighty dollar, right? How do I build? What's the goal? I need money in my bank account, and how do I get there? By saving it and investing in 401s, which has no benefit to me whatsoever. But man, it makes a lot of other people rich.
Right. So I feel like that actually reminds me of where he talks about owning real estate, and it's like it's almost like you'll own a real estate and it shows up on your balance sheet as an asset, and it's like, but you're not really going to get any value, or you're not going to get anything out of it until you start serving people. It's like it's just the accumulation of a property, the accumulation of money. If you're not really utilizing it to serve or to produce or to be a steward, I feel like I feel like all you have left is to just put the money in the bank. And then to your point, I mean, the banks, they've got their own agenda.
Well, and I like how he points out how being a steward, if that is your perspective, you understand that the things that come through your life as assets are only yours to use while you're here, right? You can't take them with you after you die. And I think that's a big point that resonated with me, just because at the end of the day, if you're being a steward correctly, and you're utilizing the assets that are in your hand, it should be to find a way to bring value to others with those assets.
Exactly.
And so I think it's just a good thing to kind of point out that you're not taking this with you.
Right.
And so you got to find a way to add more value to every situation while you're here, because once you're gone, I mean, I think he talks about one person that was set up, that was a teacher. I can't remember what the guy's name was, but he talks about the guy that was set up with training and stuff, that after he died unexpectedly, he could still be a steward of the things he had. But most of us don't by the time we forward think to that, we're probably getting close to dying anyway.
Right. 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 So, what you guys think about how he kind of, I feel like he relates this also to starting a business. You know, like it's almost like the way he explained it, if you were to follow it in starting a business, it's like, well, who would say no to that? You know, because he kind of talks about, you know, if you need cash to start a business, all you'll need is to develop the concept, research it, provide the evidence, you know, of the marketplace, write a business plan, do the implementation as you can, and then convince other people to give you the money you're looking for. And I mean, if you don't even really do that, I mean, I don't know. It's just the way he kind of breaks that down. It just seems so much. It almost makes starting a business kind of that much more simplistic.
Yeah.
In which
Well, I
case,
think we tend to overcomplicate things anyway. I think that's another excuse for us not to get to the next step. Oh, it's too hard. It's too much work. I didn't know that, or blah, blah, blah. You
right,
know, it's not, these books all say the same thing. Like being successful is not a hard concept. It's just takes hard work.
right. So last thing I want to talk about on this chapter, before I forget, he talks about. It's funny because when I read this chapter, where he talks about discussing money, does it make us vulgar? It's interesting because I never really thought about the fact that discussing money is a vulgar topic until I started thinking about, you know, like certain family members, even friends. Sometimes when I was at school, even, you know, even remotely accidentally coming across the money conversation, people just shut up. They're just like, no, this is awkward. I don't want to talk about this. And it's, but I'm like, why? It's like sometimes I feel like I find mistakes in the way I manage money through talking with other people that manage their money. I'm like, oh, well, you know, do you ever have this same issue here? And they're like, yeah, you know, that was when I used to do whatever. Right. And so it's like, I feel like if we don't have these conversations, I feel like financial intelligence continues to be harder and harder and harder to get to because it's like, how do you learn it? You can't even talk about it. Have you guys ever noticed money being a vulgar conversation, or just, you know, anytime you try and bring it up to somebody, it's almost like, you know, you're being inconsiderate or they don't want to talk about this. You guys run into any of those situations before?
Definitely taboo.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely the expression, or, you know, money and politics. You never want to talk about money and politics unless you want to fight, right?
Right.
So sure, it's definitely a stigma about it. You know, and those who have don't want to talk about with those who don't, and those who don't want to hear about those, they don't have it. You know, if it makes them feel bad or vice versa. You know, it's all this. You know, but you know, that's probably the negative part of the whole thing is that maybe we had these conversations, we wouldn't be fighting all the time, we wouldn't be hating each other so much because everybody a little bit more educated about it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you're taught at such a young age, don't be boastful about the things you have. So your parents, like, you know, your birthday, you get something really cool. Well, if you've got a friend who doesn't have as much as you, you're not supposed to tell them about it or brag about it. And it's like, I think we're brainwashed at such a young age that talking about money is such a bad thing. And I don't even think our parents and older generations realize how a message like that to a young child really creates a lifelong taboo of conversation with that because they're afraid to approach the subject. I mean, I know that when I was first learning about money, I didn't know what I didn't know. I didn't know how much money. I still don't necessarily know how much money I would need as residual income coming in to live the kind of lifestyle I want to live because I've never lived it.
Right.
And the only way to find out is to ask people. And even as an adult, people who were good friends of mine, like, I don't think I've ever approached that conversation because of this thought right here.
It's
They'll
hard
feel
to,
like
yeah.
it's intrusive or it's nosy or it's a negative. And I'm not like, I don't care. I still love you whether you have that much money or not. I'm not asking you
Right.
to give it to me. I'm just trying to get an educated idea of what it would cost to have you know, your kind of lifestyle with residual money.
Exactly. Exactly. So jumping into the next chapter, I do want to talk about this one as well, because this one actually is my favorite. So the myth is, so the chapter was called High Risk Equals High Returns. And the myth itself is safe investments yield low returns, and then high returns come from risky investments. Whereas in reality, investments that support or align with one's sole purpose have less risk and much more. And so this is very interesting because, so based on what I do, I've like studied risk. And so I think one of the first things I learned was there's a direct or an inverse relationship between investments and risk, or returns and risk. And so the next thing we learned is how to mitigate risks. Whereas I don't know a lot of people know that, or like know what mitigating is, or how to transfer risk, or any of these different types of things. But then when you get into talking about what they actually are, people do know. So like transferring risk, contracts and insurance. Mitigating risk, management, actually being there, showing up, being on site, knowing who's responsible for stuff, knowing who's accountable for stuff. Like all of these different things, it's almost like when we get to the stock market, it's like, fuck it. You know, they're regulated. They have to do all this stuff. They're going to do it right. Fuck it. You know, but here's a really good example in here. What is the name of this company? Where it's like an advertising company. And so their whole point was to kind of, you know, another way of just doing advertisements. You know, so companies would pay these individuals and they would just run ads. And so what they were doing is they were just cheating the system. And it was very easy to cheat the system. And so the company imploded. And it's like, it was very simple. It's like, okay, well, if you had looked at their value proposition, you'd have seen they weren't adding anything. So there was no way that they could have continued. Whereas, you know, like I said, I feel like a lot of times when we look at the stock market, it's very easy to just say, no, you know, we'll just look at the 10K, if anything, and then, you know, we'll just invest. Also, he talks about gambling versus investors, and he really talks about there really isn't a risky investment. It's more the investor. What are you guys' thoughts about, you know, so basically the myth of you have to take on high risk and accept that high risk in order to, you know, for the possibility of getting high returns.
Well, you know, I kind of, when you talk about this kind of stuff, I kind of start thinking, you know, you talk about high risk, low risk. I don't know that I look at it all the same anymore, because the more I think about this and the more I read this kind of stuff, to me, a lower risk investment that I would be in for the long haul of my life, where I have nothing to control it, if that doesn't get me to my residual income, even that low risk investment, according to an investor standpoint, is a higher risk investment because it's not actually getting me where I want to go.
Exactly.
So that's where the risk actually comes in, is right. Does the investment mirror the vision to get you there?
Exactly. And he talks about opportunity costs in here. To your point, you could have an investment, you could have the resources for that investment, but if it's not going to get you to where you're going, why even do it? Like, it's a waste of time. You know, it's almost like you could use that opportunity, or you could use those resources to go into a whole nother opportunity that maybe could get you closer to that goal. Any other thoughts?
You know, I think I mean, for sure, because I think it's a matter of high risk, low risk, as far as people would think, okay, investing in a hedge fund is a high risk investment. Investing in a mutual fund is a low risk investment. No, it's nothing to do with whether that, if you will, was the beta or whatever, the alpha, whatever the investment terms for it. an uneducated decision is high risk. An educated
Exactly.
is low risk. No, the educated can be a very high return on an investment, which a lot of times people, oh, that's a high risk. No, it's a big return on investment with an educated decision.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
Where obviously he's not a big fan of traditional types of investments, mutual funds and 401s and stuff like that, with very little control. And generally people doing that uninformed. Oh, well, somebody told me to invest in 401, so I did. Well, now you're in a high risk situation because now you've tied up your money. It's going to be a risk that I'll never touch. And what's your upside? Well, I don't know. I don't have to pay taxes for 50 years. Well, sure, you don't get the benefit either. Oh, great.
Right.
Even you're better off leaving it in a couch. At least you can touch it.
Right. Exactly.
Look at it.
Exactly. No, I think that's a really good point. Honestly, I think that's a really good point.
I'm done.
Natalie?
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you guys. I think of it too as, when you sign up for your 401k and every year you evaluate at what level of risk do you feel comfortable with at this time. And you look at your age and the age range, and if you fit appropriate, then that's the category you choose. And then you wait until next year to choose again. And so it just seems like I don't know, almost like a standard or something that is supposed to be established, but I can absolutely see how it's a myth.
Right.
So,
Right. I think honestly we should invest in what we know in, right? Craig, to your point, if you're going in with an educated decision, you know all the risk factors and you know why they're not going to happen or how you can mitigate them. Well, then where's the risk, right? Invest in what you know in. Whereas to your point, if you're invested in 401ks, you're invested in mutual funds, it's like, okay, well, who's managing them? It's like, you probably don't. So how do you that's a high risk to me. I don't know this person or how they invest. So, and then he gets back into the value proposition. Honestly, I feel like this value proposition is something that I kind of overlooked a lot prior to reading this book. I was always more focused on the mission and the vision, which I think there's still a place for that. However, I have a lot more of a respect of going through and truly having your value proposition, as well as other people that have actually thought through their value positions. I feel like it's pretty easy to just write one down, check off the box, and then not actually, check back on it. Do you guys have value propositions for your businesses, and how often do you guys look back at them, if at all? And I'll start. I have a value proposition, but it was one of those things where it literally was a check box. I love that you have weights.
Sorry.
All good. All good.
Yeah, so we do have a value proposition. We have a mission statement.
Beautiful.
And we talk about it in our team meetings often.
Beautiful.
We talk about what our main goal is, and our main goal is not to sell properties, right? That pays the bills, but that is not what our objective is when we work with a client. And so we actually talk about it. I mean, we don't review the value proposition or the mission statement and those type things verbatim, but we do make sure that on a weekly basis, we have a focus that lives that mission statement and value proposition.
Right. Sweet. Craig, Natalie?
I'm silent because I don't really have a formal one as far as that goes. I'll tell my clients to go make one for sure. Thinking about it, obviously I have two big parts of my practice. So if we're talking about what is my value proposition to my clients, for the estate planning is trying to make sure, allow them to, have maintained control over their legacy and their financial life, if you will, and to allow them to keep it in the family. I mean, that the value is making, you're working hard, you're putting all this stuff together, you're creating all the value for you and your family. How do we keep that? I mean, so my value proposition is, keeping the value, creating for the value. On that side, I guess, but yeah, unfortunately, it is not a written mantra that I probably should have on my wall, but I do not.
It's all good. It's recorded now.
That's true. It's fair. Done.
Natalie?
Yeah, I don't have a formal one either, and
That's
but
okay.
there's definitely value in having one.
It's okay. What value do you bring to your clients?
Oh, just try to provide them all the support and answers that they can get and assist them wherever possible.
Awesome. Perfect. Well, I hope you guys liked these chapters, these 2 chapters. I won't do more than 2 hours next time. So next week's reading, I think we should go through myth 7 and myth 8. So those are both so that's about an hour and a half.
Okay.
And so both of those is self-insurance and then avoid debt like the plague. That one I'm kind of excited about.
I'm interested on that one because that's not a bad thing in my opinion.
Exactly, that's the myth.
Oh, God, okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
So, and then he talks about self-insurance too, which is a very interesting chapter. I think there was a lot of value that I got out of that. So,
Okay.
awesome.
Got it.
Sounds good. Thank you, David.
No problem. Well, looking forward to next week, y'all.